So I just thought I would share my vocation story, a little bit of how I got here. And every vocation really is a mystery of God's love. So much so that we're often reminded of that by some of the kids we know in New York. But one of my favorite stories is one of our convents in the Bronx is right next to a Catholic elementary school. And so every so often we're invited over for lunch and recess with the kids. And so we have a blast. It's like basketball and tater tots and all kinds of fun. But over lunch with the kids, we always have the most profound conversations, especially with the 5-year-olds. And with kids, you can only talk about saints and angels for so long until they want to talk about more practical things, like what we're wearing. And we get the best questions like, were you born like that? Or, do you sleep in that? So anyways, one day one of our sisters was having lunch with a little 5-year-old girl, and they were going back and forth about the saints and angels, and then all of a sudden she looked up at her and said, "What's that on your head?" And the sister tried to explain, well, we wear the habit as a sign of our consecration to God, and we veil ourselves, and she started talking about brides and weddings, and she could see the little girl just wasn't getting it at all. So finally she said, "I wear a veil because I'm married to Jesus." And the little girl slams her hands down on the table, looks up at her and says, "He chose you?" Amazing, right? I know, I ask myself the same question every morning. But his choice, it is a mystery and it's a total gift. But I think this little girl was touching on something really profound, that each of us has this desire in our hearts to be loved, to be known, to be chosen. And God places this desire in our hearts because He intends to fulfill it in each one of us. In St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, it says, God chose us in His Son before the foundation of the world. Before the foundation of the world, He chose us, He knew us, and He loved us into existence. And so my vocation, as a sister of light, it's really responding to that choice, which is a total gift, and as John Paul II described it, a gift and a mystery. So I'll just share with you some of the graces that God's poured into my life. And I think that it's always good to hear this, the story of God's pattern in someone else's life, because then it allows you in a certain way to reflect on His work in your own life, and just really that our God is so, so good, that He would call any one of us and create any one of us. So for me, I grew up in a Catholic family in Massachusetts, and for me, I think, and I really believe the way I can see it is that Our Lady, the Blessed Mother, was a huge part of my life. When I was a child, the town I grew up in had a lot of Portuguese immigrants, so I heard and I knew about the story of Our Lady of Fatima, probably even before I knew about the story of Bethlehem. It was just so much a part of my life. So Our Lady, she captured my heart and my mind and imagination. I just had a love for her as a child. And so the day after my first communion in our church, we had the opportunity to consecrate our lives to Jesus through Mary. And so I did that when I was 8 years old in my little parish. And I see now, years later, how that small act of faith that I made, that our Blessed Mother really took that. And that's how she is. She guides us and sees all our offerings and all our acts of faith. And the way she guides us is so gentle, and her hands are so light and soft that we don't even know she's been guiding us all along until we look back in retrospect. But I always loved Our Lady, and my family, we practiced the faith, went to church on Sundays, but we really didn't pray at home or anything much more than that. And when I was in high school, I was really involved in sports, and I had lots of friends, and I was really ambitious, and I wanted to do something great and meaningful with my life. And so I had heard about the service academies, and I knew it was a great opportunity, a good education to serve and meet great people and travel the world and serve my country. And so I applied, and then when I got in, I thought, oh no, I have to go. So I went to the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, and it was an incredible experience. The people there met just wonderful people, and the people it attracts are kind of intense people, and so they were intense about everything. Their faith included, and it was really the first time I met people who hearts were really open to God, really, they were on fire with love for God. And I'll never forget it, I swear I encountered Jesus alive in the heart of another person. And it was so stunning to see Christ, encounter him there in that part. And I began this journey of discovering who God really was. And at a certain point, I thought, if that's who God is, this God is so good, so good, so loving. I want to give my whole life to him. But I didn't know what that meant or how I could live that or what that even could look like, because religious life was so far from my thoughts, and I had never seen an example of it, really. So anyways, I just continued to be at the academy, and my sophomore year at the academy, there was a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and a lot of my really great friends were going, so they invited me along, and I thought, sure, I'd go. And it was this incredible group of people. It was led by a rabbi, a priest, and a minister. So we were like a walking joke everywhere we went. And we just traveled all over the Holy Land. But for me, I had a profound experience while I was there. The gospel came alive to me. And it was before, up until that point, I think it was just a story that I had heard. But to walk in the same place that our Lord, where love himself walked the earth, where love chose to dwell, and to see that God became man for me. It was just a stunning realization, and that Jesus is alive, and that he wanted to have a relationship with me. All this sort of kind of clicked in my mind and in my heart. And in a particular moment, I was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, and off in the distance, I saw a religious sister in her habit. And I think something just resonated in my heart and awakened in me. And I knew that she was living her entire life for someone. And that was also what was written on my heart, but I had no way to express it. But I just knew. That's what I was meant for. But practically, that didn't mean that much, because after I graduated, I still had 2 more years at the academy, and I had 5 more years of service to the United States government. So, which I was sort of happy about, because I'm kind of a procrastinator, so I enjoyed putting it off for 7 or 8 years. But really, after I graduated, I went to serve on a ship off the coast of California, a destroyer, and we spent hundreds of days out to sea. And this was all part of my formation, all part of God's plan for me, because, while we were out to sea, so much is stripped away. And basically, you're back down to all that you have is your own thoughts and the work that you do. And they say there's no atheists in foxholes. I think it's sort of like that out to sea. You have to ask the big questions in life. And when we were out to sea, I could see that in the guys that I worked with. I had some pretty tough ones with me. I was with all the gunner's mates and the fire controlmen. So these are like tough and rusty kids. So, but I could see when we were out to sea and everything was stripped away, I could see in them this desire for love. And I could recognize it in them because I knew it in myself. And I knew that my heart had this insatiable desire for love. And it was like St. Augustine said, you've made us for yourself, O God, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you. And I was living in this restlessness, and I could see it in them also. And I knew that Jesus was the answer, and that he was the only one who could satisfy these great desires. And so, I had some good times. It was the best of times and the worst of times, really intense environment. But I was healed each night by the intensity. I would drive the ship oftentimes at night. My captain would put me out to sea at night. And so just seeing the beauty of the stars each night, it was seeing the wonder of God's creation, the beauty of God in nature, and then also the beauty of him in the human heart and in the human person with all these people I was working with. So it was this wonderful coming to know him as he was. So I worked on this ship for a couple of years, and then after that I got stationed in Naples, Italy, which is a couple of hours south of Rome. This was like this incredible experience because I got to be at the heart of the church in Rome, and to see how young and alive and how beautiful the church is. And throughout that time, God was leading me to a religious vocation, and there's lots of religious in Rome. It's almost like a fashion show of religious sisters, so you can see them everywhere. And so then it became much more of a possibility. But I didn't understand really what a religious vocation was. And I thought maybe God would want me because I was, talented or smart enough, or I could work really hard for the church. And really that is so far from the truth. And what I learned is that God calls us in our poverty and our weakness, and he magnifies, and that's where his mercy can dwell most fully. And like St. Paul said, willingly I boast of my infirmities, that the power of Christ may dwell in me. And I learned that God doesn't call us for our gifts or our talents, but he loves us. He loves me for me. And he created me because he loves me. And that, a vocation, all it was, is a response to his love. That he was calling me to religious life, to be his spouse. So this is because this is the place where my heart would meet his heart. But as I was sorting through all of this, I didn't know what it meant or how to do it, because I had a desire for love and a desire for marriage. And in all of it, the Lord showed me that he was enough. And that he's the hundredfold, and that he's more than enough. And he showed me that I could get married, and he would bless me, and I would be happy. But that wasn't his will for my life. And I could choose to respond in total freedom. Like his arms were open, and his heart was open. And I could give all of myself to him, and he would have me, and that's what he created my heart for. So it took a lot of prayer and a lot of acts of faith, because it's not something you can perceive necessarily without deep prayer. It's like it only can be seen through the eyes of faith in this way. And so, anyways, I began looking at religious communities in Europe, and I had this romantic ideas that I'd live out my days in some monastery in Tuscany. And then the next thing I knew, I was hearing about the Sisters of Life and visiting convents in the Bronx. And it wasn't quite how I imagined things, but really when I met our community, I couldn't believe that it existed in the church and in the world. It was so much of what was in my heart I was seeing lived out in other people. This charism of life, this call to proclaim the sacredness of human life, to say that each person is loved not for anything they can do, but for who they are. Because God created each one of us as a mystery of his love, as a wonder of his love. And that each one of us is destined to live for all eternity in his love. So to discover that, and to discover that people don't have value because of anything they can do, but for who they are and who they were created, and that this choice that God made for them before the foundation of the world. And then seeing in our community the power of God's mercy lived out. We have a convent where pregnant women live with us, and going to visit there, it's like watching the prodigal son come home every day. You see just God's abundant mercy and in our hope and healing mission. And so for me, it was a yes to God 1,000 times over. But I had to entrust it to Our Lady one more time after I visited. So I began a total consecration to Our Lady, the 33-day Louis de Montfort consecration. And on the 33rd day of the consecration, I went back to my home parish where I'd made my consecration as a child. So 20 years later, I knelt down at the same altar before the same statue of Our Lady and gave my life to Jesus through Mary one more time. And when I arrived home that day, my letter of acceptance to the Sisters of Life arrived in the mail. And so it was our Blessed Mother reassuring me in all my doubts, being that guiding star, that hope, that light in the midst of much confusion and darkness, but her ever-present light. And over the years, I've just seen more and more how much our yes to God affects the lives of so many others. And I actually see it most in the women that we serve. So I thought I would close with a story of a woman that came to live with us at our convent in New York City. And her story is just one of tremendous hope, because when she came to live with us, her name is Raquel. She came to live with us. She's this talented, incredible woman. And she said that she was going to choose life for her baby, but she would never tell another woman what to do. She still thought that women could make their own choices. But anyways, after staying in our convent for a while, her understanding of herself and her great dignity began to change, and she began to view others differently. And so one day she has this amazing encounter, and I'll share it with you. She says, I'll share it in her own words because they're just the best. And she said, I was in the hospital elevator on my way to a doctor's appointment, and another woman got on with me. I said, hello. And she burst out crying and told me that she was pregnant. I said, congratulations, I'm pregnant too. She explained that she just couldn't do it right now. It wasn't the right time. Then Raquel continues, then I felt Liam move, and I placed her hand on my belly. I said, do you feel that? Right then and there, my baby kicked her. She said, wow, And I said, yeah, my baby's going to be a linebacker. He's going to be strong and he's going to be blessed. And she said, why is he going to be blessed? And I said, because he's here. Whether you laugh or you cry, if you're here, you are blessed. And she said, I'm going to get an abortion. And I said, no, you're not. You're not going to have an abortion. You're going to have a girl. I know that already, because I wanted to have a girl, but I'm having a boy. But that's okay. You have your girl and dress her up in pink and put ponytails in her hair and call her Raquel. And by the way, my middle name is Jasmine. And if she ever asks you how she got her name, you tell her you met a fabulous lady on an elevator ride one day, and she told you that you were going to have a beautiful little girl. She laughed, and we got off the elevator together, and I walked her down to make an appointment with my obstetrician. You see, I can be quite pushy. And then we asked her, did you stay in touch with her? She said, I didn't see her again until 2 years later at the same hospital. She was pushing a stroller and ran up to me and hugged me. She had twins, 2 girls, and their names, Raquel and Jasmine. And she had them all dressed up in pink, just like I told her. She made it, she said. She said, I love you, I love you, I love you. I'll never forget your name, your face, your smile. I would do anything for you, Raquel. And I said, I love you too. I understand. I've experienced it. So the beauty and the power of transforming love, that our yes to God bears fruit in eternity. So praise be Jesus Christ. Amen.